this Students Achieve tutorial, you'll learn how to set up class assessments. Begin by logging into Students Achieve. If during later screens you don't find a class you're looking for, you may need to return to the drop box in the top center of the screen. It's possible that the class you're looking for is listed in a different track. For example, most schools have elementary, middle, and high school tracks. Make sure you select the right one for the proper class. Although in the Shortcuts section there is an area to input class marks, currently that points to an older portion of the Students Achieve program that we won't be using. In order to set up an assessment, go to the tabs at the top of the screen and under Assess, Classroom, select Touch Marks Entry. This brings you to a screen called the Touch Mark Entry screen. Along the ribbon at the top, you'll see a drop-down box that lists your classes, a date field, and a few other buttons that we'll return to later on. On the left, you'll see a list of your students. If you change the class selection, you should see students that are in that class. For example here, we'll work in the ELA 5 class. To begin, we'll click the New Assessment button. If you find that clicking the button once doesn't bring up the next screen, click a second time. A new assessment window appears. Filling in this assessment window is very easy. We'll start with a very basic situation. We'll have to fill in all of the items on the left-hand side. We give the assignment a name. We'll leave everything we create in the Assessments folder. Under Type, you'll see several options. The most important ones for us will usually be summative, in which case the assessment will count for a mark for the student, or formative, which are primarily to provide information and assessment for learning for the student. Feedback is important on these assignments, so they're important to include, but we don't want to include them in the mark. The next field is somewhat optional at this point. You can select a different category for the task. For our examples here, we'll leave everything as a homework category. Due date is important. Make sure you select a due date for the assignment. Later tutorials will talk about the importance of this date. On the right, you'll see the class that we had selected, ELA 5 in this class. Below, you'll see a list of all outcomes listed for that class. If you can't remember what the codes mean, when you mouse over either a column heading or an individual outcome, you'll see a tooltip that will help refresh your memory. For this simple assessment, I want to select a Comprehend and Respond outcome, outcome 5.1. For the moment, I need to make sure I select the column heading and then at least one outcome in the list below. Then I'll click Save, and I've set up my assessment. If it does not appear, this is because there's a current bug in the program that will hopefully be fixed soon. It has to do with the date. We set the due date for that assignment as September 10th, but you'll notice that the current date is in August. By selecting the date field, a calendar appears. I'll move to a date after that assignment I just set up. Click Apply, and my assignment appears. Let's assume, before I even begin to assess students on this outcome, that I want to use this one task to assess more than one outcome. I can easily edit the assignment I've just created, rather than set up a brand new task. From the drop-down arrow found to the right of the item name, I can select Properties, and I'll return to my editing screen. I'm going to add the Comprehend and Respond outcome 5.2 to this assessment. All I need to do is make that addition, click Save again. My screen refreshes and now shows two columns, one for each of the outcomes. These outcomes could come from different strands, or as we'll see later, they can come from different courses entirely. Now to enter marks, and I can enter marks at this time or come back to this screen later. There are a number of ways to easily enter marks for students. Remember, if you don't see all of your students in the list, you might need to use the arrows found to the left above the student name to move down to additional students. If you have more students than fit on one screen, there should be an option to show all students, which is often useful to do. To assess individual students on an outcome, I can click in the empty box that follows a student name in the appropriate column. Doing so brings up the maybe scale in the row above. I'll assign this student an M for this task, and I'll repeat down the column for my other students. Often you'll find, however, that most students will get the same mark for the assessment. Perhaps you'll need to adjust the score for one or two students. There's a very easy way to do this. Instead of clicking in the cell for each individual student, this time I'll click in the column heading, this time for CR 5.2. Notice that when I do so, the entire column gets selected. Now if I click on the maybe scale indicator, you'll notice that it completes the entire column all at once for all students. If all of your students do not appear on the left, however, make sure that you go and complete this for every student in the list. There should be a Show All Student button. This is handy to include. If, once I've assessed the entire class, I decide that there are one or two students who should receive a different mark, I need to check this box in the top ribbon that says Overwrite Existing. When I do so, I can then select an individual student and change an individual mark. It's a good idea to keep this box unchecked so that you don't accidentally overwrite any existing marks. The complete column can be filled in the same way. The complete column is used for special indicators. For example, a student might have been absent from an assessment. When I click in this column, I'll see a different set of codes that I can use. These codes stand for absent, excused, incomplete, not handed in, and insufficient evidence. Finally, to the right, you'll find a comment column. These comments are useful to provide feedback to the students. Parents will also see these comments in the parent portal. Notice that when you've entered a comment, the comment indicator turns green, a useful way to know when you've entered a comment. By selecting the comment, you can always go back and edit. And that's how easy it is to set up assessments and to mark your students. We'll break this lesson of entering student marks into several different tutorials. In the next tutorial, we'll show how you can assess multiple classes in one task, and we'll also show you how you can easily assess the social skills and work habits.